Hey, Dee, remember that puzzle, The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady Spring that I did?
Yeah, I remember.
I did. I mean, I actually did it. I finished it. I told you it was going to be really hard. I'm very proud of myself.
So, I see where this is going. Okay, now you're going to do summer, fall, winter, right? Because you got to complete the series.
I've got to complete the series because that's just how I am.
It
I'm
is.
just, I'm just waiting for the next puzzle to show up in the mail.
Welcome, welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening, and we really want you all to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. Let's talk about gardening in this episode, and you go first.
So, to be quite honest, we are recording this episode 8 full days before we're going to publish it. So, we really have no idea what we did the week between this and the previous episode, but we have a pretty good idea what goes on in our gardens in early August because, we have been around the block a few times in our gardens.
True.
So, anyway, this is a good chance for me to tell people we will put the updates of our gardens in the show notes because I'll do those closer to the time we publish. And so you got to go subscribe to our Substack newsletter, the link's in the show notes, and then you'll see all the up-to-date, last-minute, what's really going on in their gardens.
So, in your garden, I like what you said about August.
Well, August is, I think that's Latin for too many signs of early fall. And so you start to hear the cicadas in the trees more often, which always, when I was a kid, that meant back to school, back to school. You could just hear the cicadas going,
Oh,
back to
that's
school,
funny
back to
because
school, back to school.
that's not how it is in Oklahoma at all. We have cicadas almost all summer. So they've been talking for weeks now. So that's funny that they start really talking in Indiana in August.
Well, that's my recollection. And so around here, we have those weird school calendars now. So
Yeah.
I looked the other day, the kids, and I should say, went back to school on July the 27th. We're recording this on the 26th. And I feel really bad for them because I'm very happy. Today is a cool, going to rain off and on day, but this is their last day of summer break and it's pathetic. What's your garden like, Dee?
So as we record this, it's hot and dry. It's a nightmare. And even my drip irrigation systems are having trouble keeping up with certain areas of the garden. I mean, I'm not going to lose plants in the shade garden, but they've gone dormant, some of them, and some of them are really unhappy. So I've been doing some supplemental watering. The good news is on Thursday and Friday of this week, it is supposed to rain and it's supposed to cool off down into the 90s, which is more normal for Oklahoma this time of year. But I wanted to tell you about something Bill and I did last night, and I posted about it on my story on Instagram.
I haven't seen it yet.
We hung a tarp over the daylilies that are in pots to get that harsh sun off of them because it is so hot outside that they might still rot, and they're not cheap plants, so they've got to be, taken care of. And I actually have something to talk about in the garden, the other part when we get to it. I hope I can remember. But we put up a tarp, we fixed a bunch of timers. Bill's going to buy another timer. One thing we've noticed this year is the double timers, which sound great because then you can just, screw a hose onto each little timer and set it up. Those keep failing in the garden this year.
Huh.
And they turn themselves to off. And so you suddenly look and your, garden bed looks really bad. Because I have a few things on soaker hoses, a few things like the box lids and stuff like that. So we're going to all single timers, just as a tip for people out there. And I've also been like hitting manual on the timers in the cut flower garden so that they water twice a day. And we also switched our watering system, the big watering system, to come on at 8 p.m. because it's just so hot. It's been 104, 106, 102 for over, I think we're on our 4th week.
That's really warm. And I will say this. I was going to say that plants are rather resilient, and so I've been getting a little bit of rain, enough that plants that just look terrible have revived, and I don't even know. I mean, they don't look as good as they usually do, but they're going to make it. But
right. I think that they will here too, and normally I don't water at night because that can cause other problems, but it looked to us like the water was almost evaporating before it even got in the soil. So we've upped our time that we actually are watering in each zone, and then we moved them to the evening for now, and then we'll switch them back later. That's what we're trying. I mean, it really is a time of garden triage here.
Yes, and so I'd say the next episode we'll get caught up on that in a couple of weeks to see how things are going. But it sounds like you have done everything possible.
You know, I thought I would put an Instagram deal. I thought I'd compile all my pictures of the of the tarp with do it in a slideshow reel for Instagram and the things you do for love.
There you go. That's a good song for that. I'm going to go ahead and do our quote, and then we'll get started with flowers. Don't let your August be 4 weeks of feeling sad that fall is right around the corner. Jasmine Vaughn Hall. That's true.
No one here is sad. Everyone here is like, thank God, it is right around the corner. So we're going to talk about cannas today.
Yes, cannas. And that was a flower. When I was a kid, my dad had green leaf cannas with red flowers, grew them in the vegetable garden. Into the season, he'd dig up all those corms, throw them in a box, store them in the garage or something, which wasn't heated. And that was cannas. That was it.
They've come a long way, baby.
You better believe it. You can get them in yellow, orange, red. They have speckled ones. They have some that are creamy white. Yeah, and then you put this on here because you found a Tropicana Black that's new.
Yeah, it was on Gardener's World. There were these canna, they were canna growers, and they were bringing their cannas to the Hampton Court Show, and they had Tropicana Black. So I should say up front, cannas grown, there's a huge canna farm, Horns Canna Farm in Oklahoma. Cannas in Oklahoma are almost all subtropical, and they just overwinter in the ground. So easy plant to grow. The only drawback to cannas is grasshoppers, and Japanese beetles. But the grasshoppers really love cannas, and they'll kind of destroy the leaves. And the whole reason I grow cannas, really, is for the leaves.
Oh, yeah.
So Tropicana Black canna, I assume, is tropical because all the other Tropicana cannas are. And so it is one that you would have to dig up or say goodbye to at the end of the season, probably. But you guys have got to go look at it. And you know what? I bet we can just take a picture of it for we're going to link to it in our notes, but maybe we can get a picture of it for our newsletter from their site, because usually they'll let you have a photo.
I will endeavor to ask for permission to use that or seek out a picture from somebody.
Since we're promoting their plant, usually they don't mind. So easy to grow here, extremely easy to grow. And I'm really kind of disgusted with the grasshoppers this year because it's been so hot and dry. There's so many of them. Like one lady wrote me today and she goes, I have never seen so many different kinds in so many different life stages. And I was like, they're everywhere. And you just walk outside and they just, bounce everywhere and they jump on you and they're just kind of obnoxious. So one thing you can do for grasshoppers is this, it's a bacteria. It's a virus that kills them, and it's called nolobate. And the bacterium's got a big long name that I'm not going to pronounce. The problem is the nolobate factory, the people who made it, It burned down a couple of years ago, and then, COVID. And so they didn't have any this year. So that's why we have so many. And then next year they say they're going to be up and running again, which makes me glad. I normally, you know me, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in the veggie. I don't do much in the garden where bugs are concerned.
Right.
A lot of hand picking. Grasshoppers, I'm okay with killing them with a bacteria, a virus, because it doesn't affect anybody else except for maybe the occasional cricket. But I suspect the grasshoppers eat it first. And the way no bait works is that the grasshoppers eat it as small grasshoppers, and then they slow down because they're sick, and then the big grasshoppers eat them. Isn't that gross?
That's disgusting. Let's go back to Cannas. So,
well, it has to do with Cannas, but
it does. Well, here in Paradise,
whatever. You don't have grasshoppers, do you?
We do have grasshoppers. I've never seen like hordes of grasshoppers where they've just come in to demolish an entire area. We don't have those.
I'm going to take a video of the grasshoppers in my garden for you. You would not believe it, but go back to Cannas.
Well, I'm going to say here, Cannas will not successfully overwinter in the ground, the subtropicals. So you do have to dig up the rhizomes each year, and then, like I said, you store them in a cool, dry place if you have such a place. And I am always amazed with how many rhizomes, when I had Cannas in the ground, I don't right now, how many rhizomes you would get when you dug those things back up. I mean, they just divide.
Especially the green ones. The green ones multiply like
grasshoppers.
Like grasshoppers. So the green ones are just, especially the green ones with the orange blooms and the yellow blooms, those suckers multiply like crazy. I will say that the bronze-leafed ones, like Australia and Wyoming, they don't multiply as fast, which is okay. But if I had to dig them up, I would just do them in containers in Indiana.
Yeah, you can do them in big containers. You want a big container, though, because they become a pretty big plant. But I was going to say, even in a big container, you have to take them inside in a cool area, not inside. But where it's cool, where they can sort of rest all winter, but not freeze.
Right. Which is kind of complicated, but I guess you could put them in a basement or something.
You could. And then if you just store them, like dry them and just store them in mesh bags or something, then in the spring you can throw out anything that's rotted, and if it's got a nice pink bud on it, that's what it looks like, a white pinkish bud on that rhizome, then pot those up, and you can use old gallon-sized pots or whatever. You just need something to give them a little bit of a start inside, and they'll start growing, and then by the time you have your last frost, take them outside, blah, 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 blah.
That is
and you'll
way
have
too
Cannas.
much trouble. That is way too much trouble. Here you
What?
stick them in the dirt. You stick them in the dirt and they grow. And I actually have them in my pots out on my back deck. I have 4 or 5 of the bronze leaf Cannas. But guess what color I'm going to have next year?
Tropicana Black.
Yeah. Have we talked enough about Cannas?
We have. I will give a shout out to Marianne Wilburn and her book, Tropical Plants and How to Love Them. I did not look specifically, but if she doesn't have a section on Cannas, then we won't link to her book. But if she does, we'll link to her book.
Oh, one more thing. There's a really pretty green leafed, but it has bicolor green leaves, so they're bronze and green. And it also has bicolor blooms that are orange, red and yellow. And that's Cleopatra. That's a very special canna.
All right.
Okay, let's move on. The first week of August hangs at the very top of summer like the highest seat of a Ferris wheel when it pauses in its turning. And that's by Natalie Babbitt. And that's my favorite quote, I think, of today.
That is a very, very good quote. And you feel like you're at the top of the Ferris wheel, which when we were kids, we probably were, because this was the time when they would bring in we call it old settlers days in Greenwood. And they would have the carnival and the Ferris wheel and stuff. And we'd save our money all summer to go to that thing. But anyway, I digress. We're going to talk about the wisdom of doing nothing.
Right. Now that I talked about no-bait extensively. But it's the idea of integrated pest management, which is the first thing, do nothing. And so specifically, you brought up mimosa webworms, and I was thinking of armyworms.
So the mimosa webworms were thick in my honey locust tree and in the neighbor across the way and the neighbor around the corner. And they have two broods, I guess you call them, one in June and one in August. And I noticed, like towards the end of June, I thought, well, where are they? And I didn't see any. And I still looked today, and I didn't really see any. I did nothing. And now my neighbor across the street, they had somebody spray, and I noticed them looking, and they still have a tiny bit, and I probably have a few. But it's just like after 2 years, they sort of disappeared. So
Yeah, I'm starting to see them here. I don't know if they're the mimosa webworm, but they're webworms. And the thing about webworms is you have to pierce the web in order to kill them, even if you're trying to kill them, right? And so what I do is if they're in a small tree, I just pull them out and then I smash them on the ground. But birds will eat them. And that's part of that wisdom of doing nothing. So last year, I don't know if you remember, but we had a horrible armyworm invasion in
I remember you
Oklahoma.
telling us.
They ate lots and lots of grass, and they scared everybody and they were creepy. Like you would walk across your grass and you'd just see them squirming wherever your feet were. And so I did a video on Instagram saying I was doing nothing. And a sweet lady came up to me at the Tulsa Herb Society meeting. I won't out her. I won't say who it was. And she said, I don't have any butterflies this year. I don't have anything this year. And I said, oh. And so I was thinking about why wouldn't she have any? I was wondering if it was the heat or whatever. And she goes, I have a confession to make. I sprayed for armyworms last year.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, I killed everybody, didn't I? And I said, well, yeah, you did, but they'll come back. But that's why the biggest problem with killing these worms, whether it's your worms or my worms, is that birds eat them. And you don't want the poison going up the food chain, and you also don't want the poison spread over other species because there's a reason they're called broad-spectrum pesticides.
Right, right. And the same thing has happened to a woman in my garden club who said, well, I don't have any bees or butterflies, but she said, I had them spray for mosquitoes. And I said, well, you basically killed them all off. Stop doing that. Mm-hmm. So we basically, they advocate let Mother Nature have a solution first.
Right.
And then if you still have problems, there's a couple suggestions, and some of these people won't like, but that's okay. So one suggestion is don't grow plants that are known to be disease prone. So, we talked about roses last week. A lot of roses, a lot of diseases. And so,
Right.
they spray those things. And if you don't want to do that, then I suggest that you don't grow the roses, at least the ones that are prone to disease.
Well, I think that's just smart gardening, period.
Yes.
Because nobody needs to be out there spraying all that stuff. It isn't good for us either to spray it all.
No.
So don't grow plants that are disease prone. And then here's the one I love. Grow many different kinds of plants to increase diversity so you're less likely to be completely wiped out by a bad year of a particular pest. And that's true. I mean, I showed a little video last night of my garden. It's 102 out there at 8:30 p.m. I'm in a bad mood because we're trying to fix all this stuff that's broken. But I put a little pretty song on top of it, and people were like, your garden looks really good for 102. And I was thinking, well, because I grow a lot of different things.
Yes. And so there are plants that like 102, and you can consider temperature a pest, I guess. At 102, they're like, I'm out. But there's other plants that are like, this is fine. I'm still growing. I'm still good. And so if you have, the diversity, then something's going to shine that year.
Well, you sure hope so. And then I like this part about encourage birds who do eat a lot of pests. So Doug Tallamy, I know I talk about Doug Tallamy periodically, but he really does know what he's talking about. Birds in the spring eat a lot of bugs. And the reason for that is they have babies, and those babies need lots of protein. So if you don't automatically spray everything or go after things, the birds will take care of a lot of it. And then there's also, I don't know if it talks about, it doesn't on here, predator insects. There's a lot of those arachnid wasps that lay eggs on tomato hornworms. Also, don't consume, one of the things that I talked about in my talk in Tulsa is don't assume that a hornworm that's over on, say, Major Wheeler honeysuckle, which is a native honeysuckle, a coral one, don't assume that that's a tomato hornworm and kill it. It's not.
Right.
It's actually a hornworm for a totally different sphinx moth that you would like to have in your garden.
That's right.
So birds eat a lot of caterpillars and other insects, and so do predators. In fact, a predator dropped a wasp as I was out in the garden yesterday because I startled her. Oops.
So here's something interesting. I'm still feeding birds, so I put bird seed out. And I have dried mealworms that are good for bluebirds and stuff. Now,
Right.
the nasty starlings will come and devour them all in the spring.
The European starling, which
Yeah,
is
the
not
European
native to
starling.
the U.S.
But I put out some of those mealworms in a little container outside of my window here a couple of weeks ago. Not a single bird touched them. And the only thing I could think of was that there's so many other live pests that are much better to eat than those freeze-dried things that I put out there. Like, no, that's a winter food, Carol. So it starts to smell pretty nasty, and so I dumped it, and I thought,
yeah.
I think I'll bring those back out this winter.
Yeah, that's a good time to do it, and very, very early spring, like when the scouts are out looking for places to nest.
That's true.
That's a really good time, too. So I love this part that you put in about keeping up with your extension bulletins about particularly invasive pests entering your area, like that. I hope we don't get those spotted lanternflies.
Spotted lanternfly, which we reported got sighted in Indiana last fall down in southeastern Indiana. And then these jumping earthworms that have been up in Wisconsin, I saw a little blurb about they're making their way around the Midwest. So, and I'm sure there's things probably you had one for Japanese beetles. And
I'm sure we had one for hammerworms too.
Yeah,
because they're a big
hammerworms.
problem. Yeah.
But it doesn't, the extension bulletin obviously doesn't stop the pests from coming into your garden. But should you spot one of these, you should call your extension agent because they're trying to figure out, where are these things? And I remember the emerald ash borer, when that first started coming into the area, they started setting up these traps, and they look like square purple kites in trees. And there was one on a tree outside the entrance to my neighborhood, but they're basically trying to figure out where these things were. And then, you know what the answer was?
I don't know. What?
They were everywhere.
Yeah, and what is it? Is it the emerald ash borer that's killing all the trees in California? No, it's a beetle. It's a beetle. I saw it on the news this morning. And that's one of the reasons the fires are so bad in California is they have so many standing dead trees from an invasive pest that came in. But, fire does clean the ground, sadly, and it'll get rid of a lot of those pests.
So anyway, we didn't have another great vegetable topic, so we just thought we'd talk about hey, don't just grab a can of pesticide or a box of powder whenever you see insects. Just kind of let things go. Be lazy like Carol and Dee.
You want to do the next quote?
I do. Leaving any bookstore is hard, especially on a day in August when the street outside burns and glares and the books inside are cool and crisp to the touch. Jane Smiley. I thought that was a good one to start our bookshelf with. And you have this week's book.
I do. And you got it from the library on your Kindle, but it's not brand new. It came out in 2013, but I saw it the other day because Claire and I were going through some of my books and she was selling them back to the used bookstore. And I saw this one on the bookshelf and I thought, we should talk about it. It's Vegetable Literacy, Exploring the Affinities and History of the Vegetable Families with 300 Recipes by Deborah Madison. And so what it reminded me of was our other favorite book, The Chef's Garden.
Yeah.
By Farmer Lee.
Farmer Lee Jones, yeah.
Farmer Lee Jones, who, if you don't follow if you're on Instagram and you don't follow Farmer Lee Jones, you are missing out because he is full of joy and he's fun. But this isn't about him today. This is about Deborah Madison's book. So it's a little bit different setup because she is a food writer. She is not a gardener, although she does have an extensive herb garden. And she may grow other things too, but especially the herb garden. And so I'm actually turning to shishito peppers. She wrote about them in 2013, right before they became every chef's darling. And what I love about this is that this book is set up by vegetable families. So the alliums are all together. The peppers are all together, which Farmer Lee also does. But she has some really great stuff in here about, like, she did, I don't know if I can say this, sauteed shishito peppers, summer's best new bite. And shishito peppers sauteed are the easiest thing to make, and they're like my husband's favorite side dish now. There are cakes, there's main dishes, but it's focused on vegetables, and the photographs are beautiful. And so she talks about the mint family, square stems, and fragrant leaves. So it's a little bit of botany mixed in with, I would say mixed in with recipes. And
well, and I like this quote.
This quote I pulled out of it. You do it.
Growing herbs is one of the best things you can do for yourself. They're easier and less fussy than many vegetables and flowers because they generally tolerate more abuse and less attractive soil.
And guess why I showed my potager yesterday in the 102 heat? It's bordered with lavender. Lavender doesn't mind it being this hot.
Lavender likes it hot.
Lavender likes it hot and lavender likes it dry, which is exactly what's happening in that garden right now. So I think it's a great book. It's fun. It's big, but you can get it really cheap now because it's used. And we have some links.
And like I said, I've checked it out from the library on the Kindle, but I think because of the pictures and stuff, I also am waiting for the book to arrive at my library branch. And so I should probably get it in a couple of days, and I will enjoy looking at that.
Yeah, I don't know who photographed it. This was sent to me for review, and 10 Speed Press is who actually did it years ago, that's funny that I'm reviewing it here now. I was looking to see, at that time, Deborah Madison was the author of 11 cookbooks, and she was well known for simple, seasonable, vegetable-based cooking. And she started working at Chez Panisse before opening her restaurant, Greens, and she had lived in New Mexico, and she probably still does. So she serves on the boards of Slow Food International Biodiversity Committee, Seed Savers Exchange, and Southwest Grass-Fed Livestock Alliance. So I love that. I love that she was talking about regenerative farming back before it was cool. Now it's cool.
Yeah, that does sound pretty good. And then there was another quote, and I'm going to butcher it because we didn't include it, but I did look for other quotes by her, and she has one that said she learned how to cook vegetarian by cooking meat. In other words, I think what she's saying is flavoring your vegetarian dishes like they're meat dishes really improves the flavor.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. That makes perfect sense.
Because people don't tend to season some stuff enough. Anyway.
Very cool book. Vegetable Literacy, Exploring the Affinities and History of the Vegetable Families with 300 Recipes by Deborah Madison. I think it's worth buying. I think it's interesting. And has really good recipes.
And if you want a new copy, we have a link on bookshop.org. They still have new copies available.
There you go. Mine I got new and it doesn't look new anymore. So you ready for the next quote?
Go for it.
August is one of the hottest months of the northern year, so hold your breath and see that the fan is in order. It's also one of the longest months, and sometimes it seems even longer. Hal Borland. Well, I'm not in August yet because we're recording this on the 26th, but I can say July was an extremely long month, and I hope August is kinder.
I hope August is kinder too. So tell us, you found the dirt, Dee.
Yeah, I did. So I was watching a news piece on something, and then they talked about the ring of forests around the top of the world. And we have before talked about, what are those plants called? Circumpolar plants that are at the edge of a forest that are on every single, they circle the pole is what they do. So these plants are at the North Pole. So the way that this scientist talked about it, he said, imagine the Earth is someone's head and the North Pole is the bald spot. And then the boreal forests of the circumpolar world are that little fringe of hair around the bald spot. And they go all the way around the world, and they're considered one of the most important parts. You know how we always talk about the Amazonian rainforest?
Uh-huh.
This part's just as important to our planet because it helps cool us. And it also sequesters carbon, which is super awesome, right?
Right.
And so it has 1/3 of all global forest resources, and it's found in 7 of the 8 Arctic countries. And it's also called the boreal biome. And it's also known as I may not be pronouncing this right, the taiga. It lies south of the Arctic Circle, and it runs through Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia, the U.S., and Canada, as well as Japan, Mongolia, and Scotland. So it's one of the largest biomes in the world. I just thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah. And so in my garden, I have a circumpolar plant. It's honeyberries.
Yes, and we talked about that one time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of and explain why that's important.
Well, I don't know why it's important, but it's cool because honeyberries are native in Russia, in Japan, in Canada, the upper United States, that you can find honeyberries all around the boreal forest, so to speak.
And I think it's because it's important because it kind of also points to the fact that at one time, maybe that was all just one forest before the plates moved.
Yeah.
And we became separate countries. And that's the idea that we have plants in the United States that are native, which are similar to plants, say, in China, but they aren't the same. So, I don't want to get too into this because I might say something wrong and then somebody will come correct me.
Dee, I'd just like to note that we have rarely had a listener correct us. I'll do the next quote.
But you know what? one of our colleagues might come over. You just never know.
You never know. Here's the quote. Now August comes with a dreamy haze of heat. Gladys Tabor.
Who's Gladys Tabor?
She's a garden writer from Days Gone By, I believe. Maybe I'll have to make.
I think she is too.
She's a garden writer from Days Gone By. I'll make her one of my lost ladies of garden writing. But anyway,
she wrote the book of Still Meadow.
Okay.
Anyway, keep going.
I was going to go down in my rabbit hole, which isn't really a rabbit hole.
There's more rabbit hole that you've got to go through.
I know. I'm going to go through my rabbit hole.
Oh, this rabbit hole. I thought you were talking about the Gladys Tabor rabbit hole.
Well, no, I could do that. So, I finished the Aunt Dimity series a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. It is hard sometimes. After you read a series of books, it's hard to get traction and get some new books going. And so I have started and abandoned several books. And so I wonder if any of our listeners have books that I might like. And so here's what I don't like. When there's an obvious agenda to the book, or what I call superfluous comments on current events when history has not judged these things, and it's going to date your book, and your book is not going to age well. Trust me. So I got to reach back to the 20th century to find the stuff that's sort of aged. And by the way, shame on those writers who want to put in these superfluous comments that don't age well, and shame on their editors who should stop them from this nonsense. End of rant. Listener suggestions are always welcome, as long as it's not one of those books. And I won't name them. They're in my abandoned pile.
Okay, so what your real problem with it is when I like the word superfluous, when it's an agenda that has really nothing to do with the plot of the book at all.
No, but they just
it's just in there.
Yeah, they have to get in there. And it's like, wait a minute. History has not judged this last decade, let's call it. Or these last, the 21st century. So don't be putting that stuff in there. It's just cheap and tawdry. I don't want it.
So it's not a rabbit hole. You're actually asking for a rabbit hole.
I'm trying to figure out which books to go down next. But now you give me Gladys Tabor as a lost lady of garden writing. So I guess I'll do Gladys. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, do you ever get tired of reading about gardening?
Do I get tired of reading about gardening? Let me say that I don't get tired about reading about some gardening, but sometimes, we do look and say, really, we needed another book on that? But,
Someone from the Tulsa Herb Society asked me, so how do you read all those books you read? And I said, well, I mean, I've read so many gardening books that now I kind of skim certain ones because I kind of know, after being the judge, for 4 years and all that kind of, well, longer than 4 years, I've judged a lot of gardening books. I mean, I know how they're put together. I wrote one, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Well,
I skim them.
I know how they're put together, so I just wrote 5 of my own and self-published. But anyway, do you have a rabbit hole?
Same thing. I do not have a rabbit hole this week because we're recording this the day after I recorded the other one, and I'll be honest, I don't have anything.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, let's talk about our...
Maybe the boreal forest. I mean, I kind of went down to find all that information.
That's true.
But that was our dirt. So our garden commissions.
So it's we're going to pretend it's August. And so I'm going to pretend I'm a washing squash, but I'm going to take out anything in the vegetable garden that stopped producing, and the suspects would be the squash, if it gets squash bugs real bad. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping to have some sweet corn. Weeding, always have to weed, and this is the time of year to make sure your weeds aren't going to seed because you don't want them to set seed in the garden. They will. Right. So anyway,
they will.
And your garden commission?
That mulberry weed. That mulberry weed is a freaking nightmare. And
it
is everywhere.
It sticks to your gloves if you wear.
It sticks to your gloves. It has that sticky stuff on it. It gets on your hands, and it has seeds when it's only 2 inches tall.
Oh yeah, it's the devil's own. It's the devil's own.
I hate it.
It's the
and
devil's
guess what?
own.
It didn't come from the United States. That's all I'm going to say. All right, we have our own bad weeds. Let's see. What would I be doing in August? The second week? Are we in the second week?
We're in the first week of August. This would be August the 3rd.
Oh, August the 3rd. You know what? I think what I'll do is go out and cut back my amaryllis and stick them in the closet so that they'll bloom in December.
Very good. That sounds like a reasonable thing.
They're in my way anyway, and I've kept them alive all summer, and it's time to start thinking about cutting them back. I might do that I'll have to do it before the 12th. I mean, I'll have to do it now if I'm going to do it.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our gardening podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our new Substack newsletter, which I personally love. Carol writes it so far, and I really enjoy getting it in my mailbox, and I know you will too. It's at thegardenangelist@substack.com.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission, and it costs you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate today. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.